Retail workers of Reddit, what's your Black Friday horror story? I worked at Walmart during Black Friday about 12 or 13 years ago. The hot items that year were $10 DVD players and trampolines. The DVD players were stacked on 2 tables near the registers, and the trampolines were in sporting goods. I was walking to the receiving area in the back when someone from sporting goods asked me to grab a U-boat, or L-cart, to load the last trampoline. I had to go all the way to grocery to get one, and as I was coming back, someone asked me about an item. I stepped just a couple of feet away from my cart, and some woman grabbed the trampoline and ran towards sporting goods. When I got there, the woman and her husband were loading up the trampoline, and it wasn't even for them. The other lady who had purchased it, she had a receipt and just needed a carryout, said, "Hey, that's mine." The husband got in her face and said, "What are you going to do about it, bish?" They started to walk off, and I was shocked. The husband looked at me and said, "The hell's your problem?" I just smiled and told the sporting goods guy to call management. The husband then said, "Run, honey." And they bolted to the front of the store, managing to get out with the trampoline. Then I got to the front near the $10 DVD players. One older woman grabbed the last one left on one of the 2 tables. Another lady grabbed the same one. They scuffled, and one lady ended up decking the other into the other table full of $10 DVD players. They all fell over, and she ran off, never frigging again. Story 2. The store is absolutely packed, and a larger trailer trash-looking woman comes to the register with 4 coffee machines, about 30 pieces of clothing, clearly none of which would fit her, a set of pots and pans, and a blender. I'm at the register serving a line of probably 20 people. She reaches my counter, and I ring everything up. The total comes out to about $200 because most of the stuff she grabbed is cheap and even cheaper on Black Friday. Of course, as soon as I tell her the total, I'm wrong. And so is the register, apparently. "You double-scanned most of it. It should be half that price," she snaps. "Hell no, I didn't, lady. Learn to count." I wish I could have said that to her, but my manager was standing right behind me on the other register and would have chewed me out like no tomorrow. So, in my nicest, most sarcastic tone, I said, "I don't believe I did. You can see everything right here on the register. If you really want me to, I can start over to make sure nothing scanned more than once." Of course, she ignored the entire thing and just tried to pay. She clearly hadn't been to the store before because our old-as-hell register system required us to take your card and swipe it ourselves. She spends a few seconds looking around for a place to scan her card, and I say, "We have to scan it up here, ma'am. The system is too old for anything where you scan the card yourself. I'm so sorry about that." She's already pissed off and keeps trying to argue with me about scanning it herself. Finally, after spitting in my face for a few seconds while I'm forced to smile like the brain-dead monkey corporate seems to think I am, she hands me the card. I check the name because legally we have to, and we also have to see ID. I look at the card and immediately expect a disaster because the first name on it is David. She hands me her ID, and sure enough, her name is not David. "I'm sorry, ma'am, I can't legally charge this card, unless David is with you, in which case I'd need to see his ID." "Are you friggin' kidding me? This is my son's card. He's letting me use it. He's at home with my husband." Just my luck, as if this whole mess wasn't bad enough already. "I'm sorry, I can't swipe this card unless it's yours. Do you have a different card with your name on it?" After some grumbling, McBishface hands over another card. I go through the usual steps and the card is declined. Of course, because how could this not get worse? "Your card was declined, ma'am." Cue the screaming, right in front of an ever-growing impatient audience. "Let me talk to your frigging manager." At this point, I'm praying for hell to swallow her whole, or at least take me out so I don't have to keep dealing with this. My manager turns around from her register and says, "Just a moment, ma'am. I'm finishing this transaction, then I'll be right with you." Naturally, this little old lady doesn't have time for that. By now, I'm pretty sure the line behind her should be paying me for the entertainment they're getting while she unloads every bit of her nonsense on me. My manager finally turns around and has me switch to her register while she deals with the crazy. I manage to get a few people through while I can hear yelling from both sides, since my manager is not great at being screamed at. How anyone thought that was a good idea is beyond me. I get a few comments and sympathetic looks from customers basically saying, "I'm so sorry, we're not all terrible." Finally, I hear McBishface yell that she'll put all her stuff back and shop somewhere else. Thank God. Except that's not what she did. Instead, she went to the exit on the other side of our department and tried to walk out with everything in her cart. My manager saw it and called LP, and so did the cashier at the other register. LP sent some of their people to her, and they tried to stop her after calling the police. I couldn't leave the register because we were packed, but I was told she tried to fight a few of the LP employees before the cops arrived. She ended up getting arrested. The rest of my day still sucked, but that definitely made it a little better. Story 3. I worked at a golf superstore as a cashier. Black Friday customers came rushing in and the lines started forming. I scanned the first item and nothing happened. The registers were completely down and the lines were growing fast. The only thing we could do was take every transaction manually, write down the SKUs, calculate the tax, and use the old credit card swipers for 3 hours. I never worked retail on Black Friday again. Story 4. I worked at a store that had a service department. They couldn't ring up anything at the service counter, but they did have a computer that looked like a register. A customer was standing there patiently, waiting to be helped. Eventually, someone noticed him and asked what he needed. "I'd like to pay," he said. "I'm sorry, this isn't a register," the service tech replied. The customer then tried to convince the tech to let him pay there because the line for the main registers was 3 hours long. Of course, the tech couldn't help him. He only had a computer for making appointments. After about 15 minutes of arguing, the customer finally walked off to find the real line. Here's the best part. While he was arguing, someone else saw him standing at what looked like a register and got in line behind him. Then, people saw the shorter line and got in behind them. With nobody managing it, the line to nowhere grew quickly. 15 minutes was all it took for the knot line to snake all the way around the department. So, when the doofus who started the whole fiasco went to find the real line, he ended up at the end of the one he had created. The guy behind him overheard that there wasn't a register and followed him, and the next customer followed the second, and so on. They walked in a full circle for about an hour before someone finally noticed them. We almost had a riot when a manager had to tell 100 people that they weren't in line at all and had just waited an hour for nothing. That same year, we had several scuffles where the main register line forked into two. From then on, we marked off a huge register path and assigned several employees to manage the line. Story 5. The customer who took a dump in one of my fitting rooms and then wiped himself with a $125 Polo Ralph Lauren shirt. Nothing more needs to be said. Story 6. I was not an employee, but I once stood behind a woman at Target who was returning a newly bought iPad. She was furious because her iPad was not charging. She insisted that the tablet had a Wi-Fi connection to the store and should be charging through it. The employee told her that the cord it came with was the only way to charge it. She balked at that and kept insisting that since it was connected to Target's free Wi-Fi, it should be charging. Sadly, that is not how anything works, and she eventually left while shouting obscenities. It was painful realizing she genuinely thought Wi-Fi charged her iPad. Story 7. About 15 years ago, I was working at a bookstore in a mall. Somehow, around 5 p.m., I found myself the only employee in the entire store, no coworkers anywhere, and we were slammed with customers. We usually had music playing in the store, controlled by a basic 5 CD stereo in the back office. And of course, this was the day the inoffensive holiday music got put into rotation. Around the time I was left alone, I noticed the stereo had gotten stuck on repeat, playing the same song over and over. I didn't get a chance to leave the counter for at least an hour, so I was forced to listen to some generic, very jazzy Jingle Bells about 30 times back to back. Story 8. Just today, I sold a couch to a guy who drove a Prius with no roof rack. We do not deliver, and he refused to leave until we somehow figured out a way to secure the couch to his car. Not only had he clearly not planned ahead, but he was also a total jerk, insisting it was our problem. We ended up using half a spool of twine to tie it down, and he had to climb in through the window because the twine went through his doors. I really wish I had taken a picture. At one point, he complained to our GM, who had no idea how we were supposed to have fixed this. Finally, we insisted he sign a waiver before leaving because we were not about to be held responsible for his own stupidity. Of course, this all happened during the busiest part of the day. I don't mind helping customers load or tie things down, but this guy definitely took the cake. Story 9. So, here's my last customer from today. I'm a service advisor at a very large Toyota dealership. My typical cutoff was approaching. I usually stop writing up cars about an hour before my shift ends, but I got a car in for a wheel rotation. I wrote it up and immediately got it into the shop. My techs finished it lickety-split, and I even took it over to the wash myself since I was bored and wanted it done right. I vacuumed the car, drove it up to the drive-out section, called the customer, and turned in the paperwork to be closed out. I asked my boss for some of the Knott's Berry Farm tickets that all Toyota dealerships in SoCal are handing out. When the customer came to pick up his car, I let him know I had managed to get some tickets for him. His face lit up like Christmas. I hope he has a great holiday season. Story 10. When I was in school, I worked at Walmart for the holidays. They had a fun agreement where if you worked Thanksgiving from 6 p.m. until Black Friday morning at 6 a.m., you didn't have to come in on Black Friday. Fun, right? After Thanksgiving lunch with my boyfriend's family at 4 p.m., I headed to work and put on an oversized yellow smock with a blue sun on it. I was put in charge of 70-inch plasma screen television vouchers. I was given 7 vouchers to distribute at 8 p.m., so customers could go to the register, pay for the television, and have it loaded into their car around back. Problems arose very quickly. A line for the 70-inch televisions formed as soon as I started my shift at 6 p.m. Once 7 people were in line, I had to turn others away. At 8 p.m., the vouchers were distributed. Customers 1 and 2 were a husband and wife, an older couple who brought camping chairs to wait for their 2 vouchers. Here's where the mess began. Customer 8 approached me for a voucher. I told him they had all been distributed and that he was free to come back within the hour to see if anyone surrendered theirs. He became visibly upset and angry, and there was nothing I could do. Then customer 1, the older man from the couple, stepped in. He offered to sell his voucher to customer 8 for an amount close to the price of the on-sale television, which had not yet been purchased. Customer 8 reluctantly agreed, handed over the money, and received the voucher. The older couple then walked off with not only Mrs. Customer 2's television voucher, but also the newly acquired cash to buy the television at the register. Customer 9 then approached me, very angrily shouting, "Hey you, aren't you going to do something about that?" While gesturing wildly at the older couple who had scored and the poor guy who had essentially paid double for a Black Friday television. I had to explain that what others did with the vouchers was their own business. The man got way too close, so one of my coworkers stepped in to help. He then stormed off, claiming that Walmart cheated him. 2 months later, I quit to work in my licensed field and never looked back. Years later, I still have no regrets. I don't even like going into the store I used to work at. Story 11. Not retail, but I worked at a restaurant right across the street from the mall and open on Black Friday. So naturally, after people got great deals, they came to eat. I was sitting in the back of the house Black Friday morning, waiting for my inevitably long shift to start. It was incredibly busy, but I wasn't about to clock in early. I was chatting with one of the managers when I heard a hostess scream over the walkie, "Help! Help!" I immediately rushed to the entrance and saw 2 grown men on the ground fighting, one in nothing but his underwear, and my shift lead trying to pull them apart while screaming, "Frigging stop! This is a family restaurant! There are children here!" I jolted forward to try to break up the fight. This is where it gets weird. Everyone was gathered around the small area, either watching or trying to help, when someone grabbed a fire extinguisher and started spraying us. So now, we had a bunch of people trying to break up a fight between a man in his underwear and another guy, all while someone was spraying us with a fire extinguisher, and Christmas carols played in the background. Finally, we managed to break up the fight. The cops showed up. Whole 9 yards. Turns out, Guy 1 got the last television or voucher from Best Buy, and Guy 2 was furious about it. He followed Guy 1 to the restaurant, trying to buy the TV from him. When Guy 1 told him to screw off, Guy 2 took off his pants and started fighting him. Story 12. I worked at Walmart years ago. One of my managers thought she was being sneaky and swapped my Black Friday off shift with an on shift at 9 a.m. My shifts normally didn't start until 1 p.m. and ended at 9 p.m., so this was complete BS. I was in the bakery department and had already worked all of Thanksgiving the day before because they needed extra help. I came in at 6 a.m. that day and worked a 14-hour shift, since most of my team had been given the holiday off. My manager's excuse was, "You're young. They have families they need to be with and kids to celebrate with." Needless to say, I was pretty angry. I found out that the Black Friday sale was a 65-inch LCD TV in electronics and PS3s. So, needless to say, it was going to be a bloodbath. I stayed in my department because there was literally no one else there and caught up on much-needed sanitation. When the manager found out before the sale started, she came my way to rain down fire, brimstone, and BS on me. Thankfully, I could use their own policies against them. There needed to be at least one member of the bakery crew on hand to write on cakes, and since I was the only one there, they were out of luck. I got out of the Black Friday chaos, had an easy day of work, and the perfect spot to watch the madness, all while sticking it to a manager I hated. It was a beautiful day. Story 13. This actually happened just today. I work at Starbucks. I went to do my routine lobby and bathroom check to clean up during the craziness. When I went into the men's restroom, there was crap smeared all over the walls, toilet seat, and mirror. I really had no choice but to clean it up with my coworker. Definitely the most disgusting mess, literally, I've ever had to deal with in my life. Update. I talked to my manager and showed her this exact post, reading a bunch of the replies. She wasn't mad, just in awe that we were willing to clean up the mess. Even she said she would never, ever do that. We went over the policy and reviewed our resources in case something like this happens again. There comes a point where your mind is just go, go, go from the craziness of customers and orders. The poop didn't seem to faze me at all. I'm still baffled at who would wipe feces on the walls at a Starbucks. I don't think we'd pissed off anyone that badly. The good news is that my boss said she's very thankful to have me and all that good stuff. We do have a number to contact if someone decides to smear feces everywhere. In the meantime, we're supposed to just lock the door and put a sign on the front. Thank you to everyone for helping me out. I did not expect so many replies. I now know not to clean up the poop myself. I feel a little stupid for doing it, but I'm glad I've learned the proper procedure. Story 14. I work at a kid's store where almost everything was half off today. Normally, I help moms and grandparents at the register, so I don't see Best Buy-style chaos over televisions. Instead, I get old ladies yelling at my coworkers over the price of smiley face pillows and women bringing in hundreds of dollars worth of clothing and kitty makeup they bought weeks earlier at full price, just to return it and buy it again at the sale price. One grandpa shouted, "This is BS," at me because I told him we were out of bathrobes. Good times. Edit. Reading all these replies has taught me that the store I work in has a completely terrible return policy. We do all returns right then and there in front of the customer, sometimes without receipts. I have to get a manager to approve every return before I can process it at the register, so there's no way for me to lie to customers to make them leave. Sigh. Story 15. Be me. Working my first job, second week in, on the floor at Best Buy on Black Friday. I wasn't that great at my job, so they had me running customers from the line they had set up to different registers and quickly answering questions. No big deal. At about 1 a.m., as I was running customers back and forth, we heard a commotion on the other side of the store and a few police officers came in. Turns out some guy had broken a bit of plastic off one of the information plaques and tried to use the pointy piece to stab an employee in the neck. I never found out why he did it. People are crazy. I am so incredibly thankful not to be working retail anymore. Story 16. When I was working at Walmart, a coworker and I had a lady come in during our Black Thursday sale with her children. She shopped around with her kids for a while, but then she saw us in the bedding department and left her children with us, asking us to watch them while she went to get some products. Before we could say no, she disappeared and didn't return for her kids for 20 minutes. Both of us just stood there, watching her children slowly freak out and cry for their mother, wondering if she was going to come back. My supervisor walked by, saw what was happening, and once we filled her in, was quite annoyed with the mother, who still hadn't appeared. When the mom finally returned, her children ran to her, and my supervisor had a chat with her. Unfortunately, I didn't catch what my supervisor said. Story 17. Someone else's story reminded me of an experience I had a few years back. I worked at a toy store in a really fancy mall, and we only sold one brand of toys. The job focused on interacting with parents and making the kids feel special. Honestly, it was probably the best place in retail to work. If I could have had full-time hours with benefits, I would have stayed. Anyway, in early December, a woman came into the store with her 2 children, probably aged 5 and 7. I overheard her say, "I'll be back. Stay here." And then she just left them. No word to us. She vanished. Within minutes, it got busy with about 50 customers and their kids. There were only 3 employees in the store, 2 on the register and me, the shift manager, who was supposed to be helping people shop. There was no way I was taking my eyes off these kids, but there were too many people in the store. 5 minutes went by, then 10, then 15. I kept checking in with the boys to see how they were holding up. They were fine, but I'm the type who takes 100% responsibility for children in my store. I called mall security because I was freaking out about needing to watch them. At the same time, I had to process a return and handle several customers, so there was no way to keep track of the kids. Mall security ended up calling the cops. The officers showed up about 25 minutes after the mother had left. She came back and made small talk with the boys while the father waited outside. Things slowed to a crawl in the store, so my co-workers entertained the boys while I spoke with the officers. Apparently, their mother had gone to the other mall across the 4-lane street at 7:30 p.m. during the peak of the shopping rush. She eventually came back for them, but it had been close to an hour. In Ohio, that is well past what counts as child abandonment. I don't know what happened to her or the kids, but all I remember is the shock of thinking, who the hell thinks that's a good idea? And oh my God, is she going to jail? While I watched the officers escort her and her children away. Edit. I didn't want to name the store because I still have an ongoing love affair with the brand, but I'll spare everyone from playing 20 questions any longer. It was the Lego store. Story 18. The story begins at 7 p.m. on Thanksgiving, and I had to be there from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. I don't know how many other stores do it, but at mine we had vouchers for the big ticket items like the new iPads and huge HD TVs. Because of that, there usually wasn't a stampede of people, and the lines to the registers were set up very efficiently. Seeing all the preparation to avoid chaos, I began to feel hopeful that it would be an okay night, well worth the holiday pay, as the doors were unlocked. I could not have been more wrong. Around midnight, 2 large women came to my register with 4 carts piled with random items that they had coupons for. Just imagine 40 bottles of shampoo, 50 sticks of deodorant, 25 2-liter sodas, and so on, all just piled in the carts. I took a deep breath and began scanning items. When I told them the total, somewhere around $800, one of them pulled out a wad of slightly damp coupons from her bra. Stifling the urge to vomit, I accepted them and attempted to scan roughly 200 coupons. After doing about 20 with only 3 or 4 working, I decided to sort the coupons into expired and non-expired, as well as coupons from other stores that we didn't accept. We would take manufacturers' coupons and Target coupons, but not, for example, Bed Bath & Beyond coupons. About 20 minutes later, some coupons were hard to read because of the dampness. And with the ladies insisting I sort through all of them, I finalized the tally and proceeded to scan the roughly 30 coupons that were valid and acceptable. The women realized the pile was significantly smaller than expected and started complaining about the lack of coupons. I explained the situation and continued scanning and putting them away in the register. The best part came when they realized their total had only been reduced to around $700. Screaming that I was trying to scam them, one of the women demanded that I scan all the coupons. I politely explained that I could not scan the majority of them because they were expired or unusable at our store. She then asked what discounts I could give her, and when I said I couldn't offer any besides the normal 5% for using a red card, she began pulling at the neckline of her shirt, asking if there was anything she could do to get a discount. Let me stop here and say that while I am partial to the thicker female form, I am not particularly attracted to someone who looks like a pregnant Michelin man. I again politely refused and said that if they had any more valid coupons, I would be happy to scan them. Otherwise, their total was $800. Now the fun part. The 2 women decided their rights had been infringed upon and began screaming profanities, prompting the GSTL, General Sales Team Lead, and 2 AP officers to rush to my register. Upon seeing people in charge, the women began telling them how I had failed to do my job. After explaining the situation, my boss agreed with me, saying I had been following the store's policy. The women then tipped over all 4 carts full of their items, spilling everything across the aisle, threw change at me and my GSTL, and waddled out of the store. I quit right then and there, and I'm now loving my job at a bakery. Story 19. I work at a gas station, so I'm somewhat immune to Black Friday chaos. The worst we had this morning was cars lined up to get gas. On the other hand, a few Walmart employees came in and they looked like they had just returned from a war. Both of them had customers ram their carts into their legs to grab merchandise. One of the employees said it was just a flurry of shredded plastic and hands when the sales started. Nobody got a full break, and the catered food was cold and well picked over by the time they could eat. A car even sideswiped another, damaging the paint badly, and tried to drive off. On top of all that, they weren't getting time and a half for working Thursday night into Friday morning, since it's not technically a holiday anymore. At least one of them got a homemade cupcake. I had brought in cupcakes for the ladies working Thanksgiving at my job. Edit. I had that Walmart employee as a customer again today. He told my boss and me about how one of his co-workers was practically trampled. She's a petite little thing and got tripped, accidentally, not on purpose like the cart rammers, by one customer, fell down, and had several more walk on or over her. She's okay, just sore, with bruising all over her legs. We seriously thought he was exaggerating at first, but he was completely serious. Story 20. About 6 years ago, I was working at a mall bookstore's cafe. I had the opening shift, which, thankfully, because it was in a mall, was from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. Unfortunately, the late shift person called in sick, so I had 2 hours off before a 4 p.m. to close shift. While that was annoying, it wasn't the worst part of the day. I actually had a customer who was stalking me and spent the entire day sitting in the cafe reading a book, occasionally coming up to order something new. Anytime I wasn't behind the counter or in the back room, he followed me around, including during my 2-hour break. I didn't dare go to my car because I didn't want him knowing what it looked like, and my manager didn't want to call security since he hadn't actually approached me. Worst Black Friday ever. Luckily, 2 weeks later, he did approach me while I was working and asked if he could clip my fingernails as a keepsake. That was enough to get him banned from not only the store, but also the mall. My manager also made sure someone walked me to my car for the next few months, so it all worked out. Story 21. I worked at a big box store last year and was in charge of answering the phone. Only our cordless handsets were broken, so I literally could not leave the fitting room counter because that's where the landline was plugged in. Of course, it was super busy, and I quickly found out that if I parked a call and walkied the proper department to take it, the call would go unanswered because all the other employees were too busy assisting customers in the store. Even if I asked a question about item availability over the walkie, nobody responded because they were too busy. Yes, our store had little scanner devices to check item availability, but not a single member of management thought to reserve one for the telephone operator. After asking for one over the walkie 3 times with no response, I gave up. The end result was that customers would call to check if we had an item in stock, and I had to tell them that honestly, I had no idea. As you can imagine, the customers were not happy. One of the managers installed new cordless handsets about an hour before my shift ended, but the 8 hours prior had been absolute hell. A few days later, I was pulled aside by a supervisor who hadn't even been in the store during my shift that day. She said that apparently I wasn't my usual cheery self on Black Friday and that I had told a customer over the phone that I didn't know if we had an item in stock. The customer had actually called back to complain. It took everything I had not to go off on her, and the only reason I didn't was that she wasn't there during my shift and none of it was her fault. But to the other members of management, of course I told that person I didn't know if his item was in stock. I literally had no way of knowing. You didn't give me any of the tools I needed to do my job, and you ignored me when I asked for them. And then you want to coach me on customer service? Absolutely not. That's on you. I am so glad I no longer work there. Story 22. I work in a high-end clothing store that rarely goes on sale. It's a small storefront, so any more than 20 people inside makes it feel packed. It's 9:30 in the morning, and a family comes in with 2 kids who were completely wired on sugar. They were running around, acting out, while the parents did nothing because their favorite jeans were 40% off. The store has a bunch of metal pots and baskets used for display, which we couldn't put in the back because corporate would have a fit. One of the kids almost fell on a large metal basket with sharp points. My manager, in a calm but clearly annoyed tone, said, "Kids, it's not a playground." This caused Sally's soccer mom to lose it. "How dare you talk to my kids like that? Who do you think you are?" she shouted. Naturally, her husband stepped in, trying to act tough and confront my manager, who is all of 5'6" and maybe 130 pounds soaking wet. I walked over. Being 6 feet tall and 190 pounds, slightly more capable of defending myself, and asked them to leave the store, or I would call security. They told me to go to hell, so I called the pansy-ass mall security. Mall security arrived, and by the grace of the Black Friday retail gods, the one officer who was actually intimidating responded. A former university football player, 6'6", and built like a brick crap house. Billy Badass suddenly lost interest in fighting and quickly left with his family, escorted by security. Story 23. I don't think it was on Black Friday, but I was working for Payless Shoe Source at the time, and Oprah had some sort of coupon promotion on her show for 50% off. Our store was small, and it was completely packed. We usually closed at 9-10 p.m., but we didn't get home until 1 in the morning. The store was destroyed. We couldn't do any maintenance during the 5 to 6 hour rush, so I'm amazed that some people could even find the products they wanted. Story 24. I witnessed an incident involving an extremely rude, obese woman on one of those motorized carts normally reserved for the disabled. When the doors of our store opened at 12 a.m., she was in the back of the crowd on her cart. There was a bottleneck to get into the store, so she started plowing into people. Luckily, a man grabbed the back of her cart and lifted it to prevent her from injuring anyone. When she turned around to see what was stopping her, she yelled a racial slur. The man responded, "Shut up, you're not even handicapped." She tried to swing her purse at him, but lost her balance and fell to the ground. As she shouted for help getting up, people just laughed and walked around her. I'm not sure what happened after that because I had to assist other customers. Story 25. I was hired at Borders as seasonal help from November through the holidays. It was the location on Michigan Avenue in downtown Chicago, the flagship store for the company. I had a couple of weeks of regular work right before Black Friday, which was pretty busy, so I thought Black Friday would be easy. I was so wrong. I had never experienced anything so stressful. We had a constant line of about 30 people the entire day, and no matter how fast we worked, it never died down. On top of that, customers would get angry when certain books were sold out and would flip out even more when I offered to order one for them. You might expect this at Walmart, but I never thought I would see it working at a bookstore. Story 26. I'm a former GameStop manager. The worst Black Friday I ever worked was in 2006. Everyone wanted a Wii. When I got to the store at 4 a.m. to prep for the 5 a.m. opening, there were people wrapped around the shopping center in line, even though I had a sign on the door explicitly stating we could only guarantee them for the first 6 people. When I made the announcement to the crowd, I thought I was about to get my ass kicked by more than a few angry grandmas and soccer moms who had been waiting since midnight. After opening, our systems were unbearably slow when processing credit cards, but they still worked. The rest of the day was busy but not too terrible, aside from the cranky people who couldn't find a Wii. Fast forward 3 days later, a woman walked into the store with a bank statement and started yelling at me about her card being charged $200 4 times. Processing, not drafted yet. She insisted she wouldn't leave until I gave her $600 in cash from the register. It ended with her and me on speakerphone with my district manager, who politely told her to contact her bank. The cops were nearly called during the ensuing screaming, all while the store was packed with customers. It turned out our credit card processor had been overwhelmed that day, which explained the system's slowdown on Black Friday. The charges dropped off after a couple of days. Edit. As others have mentioned, she had every reason to be upset. I would be too. But she made it very personal, even taking liberties with my sexuality and parentage. Be pissed, but you can be angry without being a raging bish. Story 27. I worked at a car wash in college. We were busier than a one-legged man in an ass-kicking contest, but we were keeping up. Then, a customer came in with a minivan. Now, that alone would make for a fine story, but here comes the bad part. Puke. All over his dashboard. And I mean puke of biblical proportions. Apparently, the person selling the car washes was too busy to notice it and put him in line. When the customer made it to the vacuums, I saw the puke on the dashboard as I started to slide open the rear door. That's when I saw it, an honest-to-God pond of puke in the back. Turkey, stuffing, pumpkin pie, grandma's own whipped potatoes and gravy. Said jerk says, "Uncle Ned had too much to drink yesterday, so my brother offered to drive him home. Uncle Ned upchucked first. That's when my niece lost it in the back seat too." He smiles. "Do you think you're going to be able to get it up?" Now, mind you, if we were slow, we wouldn't do it. But to pull shenanigans of this caliber when we were this busy, I was about to go full bat crap and start clubbing him with my vac nozzle when my quick-thinking partner on vac steps in and says, Sorry, sir. Our union contract prohibits us from removing biological waste. He slams the door shut and sends the car down the conveyor. The guy stands there slack-jawed and stammers, I didn't even know car washes had unions. We do today, my partner says, grinning as he walks away. Story 28. This happened about 20 years ago, and I don't remember if it was actually Black Friday or just the holiday shopping season. While working at Costco, I witnessed a fistfight between two men over a parking space. It started exactly as you'd expect. Car A was hovering, waiting for someone to finish loading, and as soon as the spot opened, Car B swooped in from the other direction. The fight was fairly even until the girlfriend of one of them intervened with some pepper spray. She managed to hit both of them in the face, ending the fight. By the time the ambulance and police arrived, everyone trying to get in and out of the busy parking lot was pretty screwed. Story 29. I also worked at Best Buy in 2001. I won't name the location. To this day, it was one of the worst jobs I've ever had. 6 a.m. Mall store. People were literally climbing the gates. Once the gates opened, a massive flood of customers poured in, running from front to back. Some ran past me, spun around, yelled a question, and darted off again. Management told us that morning it would be a day we'd do nearly $1 million in sales in a single day. According to them, it didn't really matter how we treated people. Sell service plans, sell accessories. The cash flow and revenue would be there. Just make our numbers look good. Paraphrasing. At one point, a woman punched another customer and grabbed the last of a digital camera, running to the front of the store. My tall, lanky friend reached between two people arguing over the last hard drive, took it from them, and handed it to another guy saying, "If you're going to act like children, I'll treat you as such." I got moved up front to work crowd control. They had lined up a bunch of big screen TVs to channel people down the media aisles, CDs, DVDs, with the lines going all the way down and then back around the outside. Customers told me they were glad I was there because they were about to knock out the guy working before me. I'm pretty sure one or two of those TVs were tipped over as well. In total, it was an absolute shit show that I would not wish on anyone. I refuse to go shopping on Black Friday now. Story 30. I work at a retail chain called Always 11, and it's expected that as a trendy clothing store, we're going to be busy. What I wasn't expecting was dealing with a family who had well over $600 worth of clothing in bags waiting to be scanned, folded, and bagged. There were 5 people in the family: mom, dad, daughter, aunt, and cousin, each with maybe 5 or 6 unique items, plus basic shirts, leggings, sweaters, and so on. After folding about 10 items, the mom said, "Actually, these need to be bagged separately from these clothes. All of them need to be in separate bags." It was 12 noon on Black Friday. We already had a line of about 25 people, with all 5 registers open and trying to help as many customers as possible. Meanwhile, I had to bag and fold all their items to the aunt's exacting standard. It took over 20 minutes to get through everything, which was incredibly frustrating. Finally, it was time for the family to pay. I told them their total, which was around $620, and they took forever to pay and leave. I then went to check out my next customer, a really nice woman buying jewelry for her sister as a Christmas gift. Her husband was a retired Army soldier, and she was proud of him. Her total was about $48, and she handed me a $100 bill. I checked to make sure it was real and pressed page down to complete the transaction. But the servers were down. All of the registers were full, with people trying to pay, and the line was now nearly reaching one of the doors. With the servers down, we had to manually write down the item numbers of everything being sold and manually run the credit card machines like it was 1950. It took over 10 minutes to process a single customer, and the servers felt like they were down for hours. Definitely not a good day. Story 31. My first Black Friday was absolutely gross. Things were relatively calm until a woman burst into the store with a cart from Target and headed straight for our bathroom. I shrugged it off. A few minutes later, a customer asked where the bathroom was, and I pointed her in that direction. She came back seconds later, saying someone had used the bathroom on the floor. It was my first job and my first Black Friday, so I called a manager. My manager went in and rushed out. Apparently, the woman who had first rushed in had used the toilet but missed. She went next to the bowl instead. My manager ended up cleaning it up. Thankfully, I wasn't certified for bodily fluid cleanup. When I went outside the bathroom, I saw cart tracks of poop making a little path through the store. I have no clue how it got on the wheel, but I mopped it up. Later in the day, I found another poop spot by, or almost under, one of the couches. I still have no idea how that happened. It was disgusting. Surprisingly, I was still able to eat after that, but my manager couldn't. We've never had anything like that happen again. And instead of Black Friday, that day became known as Brown Friday. Story 32. I only ever worked one Black Friday in my life, and it was during my time at a craft store. Two things were constant during my year there. Every day was extremely slow, and for some reason, about 90% of the customers were ruder than anywhere else I've ever worked. I assumed the typical rudeness wouldn't be too bad since it was usually so slow. I couldn't have been more wrong. For the first time ever, I couldn't spend Thanksgiving with my family because I had to work at 8 p.m., and I was already in a bad mood. That night, things were thrown at me multiple times. I was screamed at far more than usual, and I was trampled by a group of older ladies while trying to make it back to the break room. But the worst moment came when a customer tried to buy a pack of scrapbook page protectors. She was attempting to buy a pack of 25, but was convinced the price was wrong because she was looking at the sticker for the pack of 10. She screamed at me for a good 5 minutes while I calmly tried to explain the price. Finally, it ended with her saying, "You're ruining my Thanksgiving, you stupid bitch." Trying not to scream back, I replied, "I'm sorry to hear that, but unfortunately, I cannot give you the lower price as it was not mislabeled." She responded by throwing a punch, which I ducked. My manager witnessed the whole thing, and the customer was escorted out and banned from the store. Story 33. Oh boy, there's a reason I need to tell this story about what happened today. I work at the largest consumer electronics store in the US. I really do love my job. Management is easy to work with, the team is great, and most days are fine. Black Friday, however, just sucks. So much. Today started like any other. I arrived about 45 minutes before we opened at 8 a.m. to help get the store ready. Once we opened, things were going smoothly. I was wearing a sweater over my uniform because it was slightly chilly outside. About an hour into my shift, something dawned on me. I was sweating. Like really, really bad. Now, I'm a big guy, but not big enough to sweat this much while standing still. I realized something was very wrong. It hit me. I was suddenly getting really, really sick. I called over. One of my coworkers told them to finish the transaction I was on and bolted. Now, a fun fact about our store, it's really small. So small, in fact, that the men's bathroom only has one toilet. I burst through the door, only to find it shut and locked. So into the trash can went all of my Thanksgiving, heaving into the trash can while some guy walked in, saw me, and immediately noped out. I felt like absolute garbage. After finishing, I managed to worm my way back outside. My general manager could tell I was sick and told me to hop on a register that no one was using. I just stood there in my own corner for about 10 minutes. Until it hit me again. Off running, I went once more. Thank God, the stall was finally open. I started all over again, but at least this time I was in my own area. Afterwards, I bought a water and sat in the break room, trying to battle this inner demon that was trying to kill me from the inside out. Spoiler, it won. And it made things infinitely worse. I threw up in the break room trash can, and then it started coming out the other end. I immediately turned and sprinted into the bathroom, dragging the trash can inside with me. From there, I called my general manager and begged him to let me leave. Thankfully, he trusted me enough to let me go. Story 34. Circa 2009, I worked at Hollister. It was already a crappy job, but Black Friday really took it to the next level. I worked dressing rooms, which basically meant I looked at how many beach-themed, overpriced items you had and walked you about 8 feet to a fitting room. This day, however, a larger woman came up to me with 5 or 6 pairs of jeans. Keep in mind, they only went up to size 11, which really isn't that big. Not my rule. Don't blame me. I got her a room. She spent about 15 minutes in there, which is a long time in this scenario. She came out with nothing, which wasn't unusual, and seconds later, I went in to collect all her rejected clothes. Hollister usually smells like a bomb of pine, and man musk exploded. But this day, I was overpowered with the unmistakable smell as I entered the room. Apparently, she had tried so hard to squeeze into the jeans that she crapped in them, and it ran up the inside seam to the top. Maybe it was some kind of reverse hate crime. I don't know. I refused to fill out a damage report, and my manager was okay with that. That $5.25 an hour job was not worth inspecting the damage, submitting it to corporate, and potentially contracting hepatitis. Story 35. So man, I caught this late. It'll probably never get upvoted, but whatever. I worked in retail for years, and Black Friday was always the big one. I was selling digital cameras, which were really at the height of popularity. One day, a man came in with his 10-year-old kid and grabbed a camera that we had protected with a wire device called spider wrap. He took it from the shelf and wandered around the store for a long time without buying anything while his kid played video games. Eventually, he wandered near the bathroom and snuck in with the camera. Our loss prevention team spotted him immediately and followed him into the bathroom. He stayed in the stall for quite a while, so eventually, a loss prevention officer started banging on the door, saying something like, "Sir, we know you have a camera." Long story short, he was trying to flush the camera down the toilet. I guess he figured that if he flushed the camera successfully, he could rip the box apart and flush that too. Only problem, he completely messed up the toilet and made a bit of a mess. Eventually, he gave up and came out with an empty box. One of the managers insisted we needed to recover the camera to prove it was stolen. Another manager just said, "Screw it," rolled up his sleeve, and went in. It was hilarious watching one of the supervisors dry heave as he saw the manager fishing a digital camera out of a toilet. Anyway, they found the camera and called the cops. To make matters worse, the man barely spoke English, so we needed his 10-year-old son to translate. It was kind of sad to see it all go down like that, but it definitely made for an interesting day and a story worth telling. Story 36. I worked a 12-hour Black Friday shift from 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. at a now out-of-business sporting goods store. A couple of notable things happened that day. Our sale was a nightmare. It was literally a deal you could get any other time of the year, but people went nuts because it was Black Friday. Buy one, get one half off all shoes. Except in the long, small print paragraph below the deal. The coupon stated that it did not include Nike shoes, among many other popular brands. Cue customers throwing huge fits when they came to the register and saw that the deal didn't go through. After about 20 minutes, my manager got so fed up that he started overriding the transactions because every cashier was being screamed at. My manager told us not to do any returns on Black Friday. Returns took too long and would hold up the line. And people would sometimes try to return big-ticket items to buy them again at the Black Friday price. A couple came up trying to return a small trampoline. I knew for a fact they were just trying to buy it again because it was on sale for $10 less than what they had paid. I informed them that I couldn't process the return, and the wife freaked out, yelling at me for a good 5 minutes. My manager eventually told her to leave, and she stormed off while the husband tried to calm her down. 2 hours later, the husband returned wearing different clothes, sunglasses, and a baseball hat. Did he really think changing his appearance would get around our return policy? He came back while my manager was on break. After I recognized him and told him I couldn't process the transaction, he threatened to follow me after my shift and break my legs, and then say something nasty about me to my manager. Honestly, it was a bunch of disturbing nonsense, but everyone was way too busy to notice or care, so I just processed the return. People are crazy. I was a total zombie after that shift. That store chain was a complete shit show. It was the same place where a guy high on meth chased me around the store. Honestly, I'm not surprised it tanked and went out of business so quickly. Story 37. I used to work security at the only shopping mall in town. It was a later shift on Black Friday itself, as most of the crowd had gone and stores were starting to close. While walking patrol near one of the seating areas, I noticed a couple sitting with a small boy, maybe 2 years old, who was crying. They told me they had found him without his parents. The child was nonverbal, just bawling, and couldn't tell us anything about his family. The entire team went into action. Another teammate and I took the child to several nearby stores, hoping to locate his parents. After about 10 minutes, I returned to the seating area and sat with the child while the rest of the team continued the search. My heart was breaking at this point from the obvious terror the child was feeling. An employee from one of the nearby jewelry stores brought out a teddy bear for the child, and he calmed down a bit. Finally, after about 30 minutes of searching, we still couldn't locate the child's parents. Following policy, we called the police. Due to actual emergencies happening elsewhere, it took them nearly 30 minutes to arrive. By this point, the child had been separated from his parents for over an hour. As the officer spoke with me, my supervisor radioed that he had found the parents. A young couple, maybe in their early 30s, arrived with 5 more kids in tow. Apparently, they had been shopping in the Walmart attached to the mall and hadn't realized until they reached the car that one of their children was missing. The siblings were more relieved than the parents to be reunited with the toddler. To top it all off, the mother asked in a very annoyed tone where he had gotten the teddy bear. The officer asked the parents some questions to ensure there was no obvious abuse, collected their information, hopefully so child welfare could follow up, and then let the family go on their way, reunited and safe. Story 38. A few years ago, I was a cashier at a department store, and the line stretched down the middle of the entire store. The system worked so that the next person in line would go to the next open register. Normally, people lined up at individual registers, so every once in a while, someone would start to line up incorrectly, and we had to direct them to the main line. 99% of the time, this caused no issues. Until this Indian couple, regulars who always tried to get us to use old or ineligible coupons, came in. I noticed they looked like they were trying to line up at a register and told them the line was elsewhere. They said they were just going over some stuff, so I went back to ringing up my customer. Then, when I called for the next person, those two strolled on up and cut in front of everyone in line. I told them they weren't in line and had to go to the back. They started yelling at me like I had just kicked their cancer-ridden kid off a bridge, while the entire line behind them was shouting for them to move to the back. They threw the store flyer at me and left in a huff. About 20 minutes later, they came back and started angrily talking to my manager. She came to get me and said she thought they just wanted an apology. Fine. I could pretend to be contrite if it meant they would leave. Turns out they didn't just want an apology. They wanted to yell at me some more and demand that my manager fire me on the spot. Of course, she wasn't going to do that because that's completely ridiculous. They left in a huff again. A couple of weeks later, my boss asked me to write down exactly what had happened, with no embellishments and approximate times. It turned out those people were threatening legal action and claiming I had refused them service because I was racist. After reading my account and checking the security footage, the store said that if they wanted to press charges, they could see us in court, and that they would fully back me. That was the last I ever heard from them. Retail is hell. I cannot overstate the relief I feel knowing I will never again have to deal with that nonsense or the miserable people who haunt those cursed aisles. I would sooner do anything else than go back to working in retail. Story 39. I actually worked it tonight for the first time. I got to the store around 3 and there was a line wrapped around the building. Oh well, crap. It was the usual busy as hell situation until I was asked to help some elderly ladies with a carryout. They smiled as we walked out, but as we passed through the doors, the alarms went off. Our policy says we have to rescan and recheck the items, and these ladies immediately started freaking out, saying our systems were messed up, they hadn't done anything, and that I must have put something in their cart. We opened their boxes and found several cartons of ammo. At that point, we had to call the cops, but they decided to, very slowly, book it. We're not allowed to follow them out, so I just watched them make it to their van and drive away. Story 40. 2 separate promotions were running, both clearly stated on the big, bold, brazen sign at the front of the store. Jeans, $60, half the regular price. Everything else, 40% off. A lady with a big peroxide-laden updo and a bulky synthetic fur coat, entirely impractical in the mall on Black Friday, marches up to the register. I greet her, ring her items through, and tell her the total. She immediately says, "It shouldn't be that much. The jeans are 40% off $60, aren't they?" I can understand the mix-up, considering the rush, the crowds, and the possible heat rash she's fighting. So I politely explain that the promotions are separate. The jeans are half off their regular price, and everything else is 40% off. Apparently, Donatella Versace is not pleased. After insisting that I was wrong and she, the customer, was right, I calmly explained the promotion again. Cue this woman angrily pointing at the sign that clearly states she is wrong, insisting that the $60 jeans must be discounted by a further 40%. I explain it to her again. Then she pulls out the big guns and says, "You're wrong. That's false advertising. You have to give me the sale that's on the sign. If you don't, you're breaking the law. This is Canada and we have laws and you're breaking them." Suppressing the urge to tell her to call the frigging police, I explain that it's out of my control and I can only offer the prices set by the company. She keeps insisting that I'm wrong and that I'm basically a criminal. I tell her she can call customer service and she fires back, "I'm not spending an hour on the phone with them. I'm calling the Department of Justice. You'll hear from them soon enough." Then she stomps out. I never did get sued, just got a lot of pity from the people behind her. Story 41. Back when I worked at CompUSA, a year before they went bankrupt in 2007, I had to work Black Friday. We only had to show up shortly before the midnight opening, but the managers gave us the option of coming in at 6 in the evening on Thanksgiving Day so we could relax a bit and take advantage of everything an empty store had to offer. Some people went into the training lab and watched movies on the projectors, while others went onto the sales floor and hooked up Xboxes for some Halo 2 LAN action. On top of that, our managers provided plenty of caffeinated options like Red Bull and Starbucks Frappuccinos for anyone who wanted to stay awake the entire time before opening. Shortly before midnight, one of our managers flagged us down and told us to come up to the roof to check out the crowd. By our best guess, the line of people had to extend an easy 600 to 1,000 feet, blocking the entrances to all the nearby businesses. This was at T-minus 10 minutes, and the line only kept growing. Once we packed up our stuff and stored it in the break room, we all took our positions. The doors opened, and it was like watching sludge pour into a sewer. People shoving and pushing themselves through the T-intersection door, shoulder to shoulder, nearly breaking the entryway glass. Within about 10 minutes, there was literally no walking space in the store, which was a problem for those of us working the camera and MP3 player counters. Normally, we'd have to walk the product up to checkout, but that was impossible. As people filed in, we stuck Post-it notes on the items with each customer's name and lobbed them over to the member service area and various checkout lanes. That's right. We actually had to throw the product just to get it to checkout. After a few hours, my coworker at the camera station noticed that another coworker seemed to be missing, so I ventured out to try to find him. About 15 minutes later, I made it to the break room and storage area only to find him on the floor, sitting cross-legged, fists pressed into his eyes, rocking back and forth in a full-on meltdown. Apparently, he had consumed 8 of the Frappuccinos and ended up having a caffeine-induced panic attack. Once I worked my way back to the front of the store, we kept going. At some point, maybe around 5 or 6 in the morning, I heard shouting at one of the checkout lanes and saw 2 of my managers book it out of the office toward a register. As I was told later, one of the checkout clerks had locked up mid-transaction and fallen backward as if he'd frozen in place. The managers pulled him out from behind the counter and took him to the break room, where they eventually learned he had drunk 4 or 5 Red Bulls within a span of 3 hours before opening. By 7 in the morning, our relief shift showed up, and everyone working the night got to leave. Both of the employees who had collapsed were fine after being pulled away from the chaos at the front. Since then, I have never worked anything so chaotic in my entire life. Story 42. Walmart story time. A couple of years ago, when the sale started, there was a surge of people rushing to grab their stuff. One lady got knocked down, and her pen went straight into her neck, thankfully missing the jugular. The messed up part is that no one tried to help. People literally stepped over her to get their crappy deal items. A coworker who saw it happen had to stand over her to keep her from getting trampled. When the ambulance crew arrived, they had to literally shove people out of the way because no one would move. People suck. Story 43. I work in a bar, which is usually untouched by Black Friday, but 2 years ago, it was stupidly busy. This guy comes up and orders 2 Double Jameson's whiskey, straight, no ice. It was the only spirit not on the optic. I pour it out and accidentally knock it against the bar, spilling a drop. I keep going because of how slammed we were. He then says he works for Trading Standards and proceeds to pull out a Walter White-style chemistry set. He tests the whiskey to make sure we don't water it down, then measures the shot. Since I'd knocked it, there were 48 milliliters instead of the 50 milliliters it should have been. They then proceed to take me to court for a short measurement. My company backed me up and sent a team of lawyers to cover me. It resulted in a slap on the wrist and an optional fine of £250 and 1 penny. only if I wanted to pay it, which I did not. Story 44. I work at Walmart in asset protection, and Black Friday at Walmart starts at 6 in the evening on Thursday. It's 30 minutes before we unwrap the pallets, and some trashy family starts causing problems over a pallet blocking the outdoor Christmas lights. I can't leave the doors. The cashiers don't know what to do since we're in the garden center, and all management seems to have forgotten the garden center exists. One of them climbs over an 8-foot-tall pallet to get into the shelves of Christmas lights. Their kids are clearly embarrassed. I tell them to get the hell out of the shelves, and King Trash laughs at me. I call management. Management decides 10 minutes before the Black Friday sales start to give this family what they want. When the family leaves, Queen Trash giggles and says she knew she'd get her way. I spend a good 5 minutes checking every single item on their receipt and tell them to have a happy holiday. The lights they ended up buying weren't even the ones that were being blocked. Story 45. There was a sale on Christmas trees that normally cost $250. If I remember correctly, the price dropped to around $80. It was my first Black Friday, and I was still learning how to do price changes. As soon as the managers opened the doors, I froze like a deer in headlights. Customers surged in and were pushing me left and right. I admittedly got nervous. I was being yelled at and screamed at over that tree. Some women were arguing and pulling on opposite sides of one of the boxes, and then a man came and grabbed it from both of them, dragging it off. It was pure hell. I literally ducked under one of the bays and disappeared until the chaos died down. Boy, was that incredibly stressful. This year, I just stayed in the back. I learned my lesson. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.